Thanks for coming today, everybody. Welcome to the July YEGBiz. And today we have Darin Rayburn. Darin Rayburn is the president and CEO of Melcor Developments Limited and Melcor REIT. Both of those are TSX listed companies. And Darin has been in the commercial real estate industry since 1991 and has held senior executive positions for the past 15 years. And in fact, I think, Darin, you and I first met probably in 1991, way back when, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think maybe you were at Oxford there or something like that at that point, perhaps?
Correct.
Yeah. So Darin joined Melcor in 2002 with the responsibility for leading the company's investment property team and building a commercial portfolio, as well as leasing and managing the commercial assets acquired across Western Canada and the United States. This is one of the things I didn't quite get until I talked to Darin a couple of weeks ago, but they have a significant portfolio down the US as well. Since 2002, he and his team have grown Melcor's commercial assets from 643,000 square feet to over 4.4 million square feet in 7 different asset classes. Darin co-led the successful IPO for the REIT in 2013 and led the REIT to stable results since IPO in spite of ongoing market volatility, including COVID, including what's happening with COVID. In addition to the Melcor REIT commercial portfolio, Darin and his team oversee just over $2 billion in development land, residential, and commercial assets on behalf of Melcor Developments Limited, including an 11,000-acre land bank held for residential and commercial development in Western Canada and the United States, with 23 residential communities and over 200,000 square feet of commercial property under active development. Melcor also owns and manages championship pro public golf courses associated with 4 Melcor residential communities. Darin remains active in the community, participating in a number of charitable initiatives, and most recently sat on the nonprofit Edmonton Oilers Community Foundation. Everybody, welcome Darin Rayburn. There we go. Yes. Hey, thanks, Lan. Thanks for doing that. You can use the emojis as well. There we go. Beautiful. Darin, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Lots of things going on. One of the things I was very intrigued to see recently, and we can talk about this in a moment, is that I saw an Edmonton Journal headline saying that the provincial government by 2046 is projecting the Alberta population to go to 6.4 million people. And that's a bit of a lift from where it is now. But what is it now? Maybe about 4.2 million, something like that. Something like that. So another 50% growth between now and another 20 years approximately, right? 21, 22 years. So that's definitely going to impact a lot of the real estate trends. But let's start with Melcor's history.
Sure.
There's one of the first jingles I heard on the radio way back when I was a kid, 7 years old. I am that old, everybody. So go ahead.
Gotcha. So start packing, right?
Start packing.
Buy a house and start packing. A Melton mat will help you move.
Way back when.
Start packing.
Yep.
Tell me the history. So Melcor started when? It wasn't always Melcor. It was
Started in 1923, Korean. And first of all, hey, thanks again for having me. It's great to see so many familiar faces and new faces. I turned a bit red there because you described all these big numbers and these big companies. And I'll tell you what, I've been blessed with amazing teams and amazing support. So let's just get that out of the way right now. But yeah, so Melcor Developments, everyone talks about it. It's great that it's a local story. Started in 1923. So our current chairman, Tim Melton, his grandfather, T.C. Melton, decided to start selling homes way back when. He said, buy in the west part of town, which at that time was where Jasper Park is. And they started as a residential brokerage, similar to Remax or anything else, and did that for a number of years. And, the company in the early 70s, so I'll jump ahead 50 years because they did a lot. They became the largest residential real estate brokerage in Western Canada. And then in 1973, T.C. Melton, the original founder, his son Stan, who was running the company, sadly died of a heart attack at an Edmonton Eskimo Saskatchewan Rough Rider playoff game, literally right when Saskatchewan kicked a field goal to win the game. And sadly, Stan's heart gave out and he died. And that's when Tim Melton, our current chairman, Tim took over. And one of the challenges the company was having at the time is wanting to grow. And they were dabbling in some development because they thought, hey, if we could have our own land and feed our agents, they could sell more houses and keep this going. And then the Meltons were approached from what was at the time A.E. LePage, which is Royal LePage, we know now. And A.E. LePage bought the brokerage business in all of Western Canada. And Melcor Developments made a decision at that time to get more into the pure development of land, development play. And they actually bought a mortgage company, traded on the Vancouver Stock Exchange, which was already public, so they had the vehicle in place. And then sort of in a roundabout reverse way, became a publicly traded real estate company. And the vision at the time was to grow that side of it, allow employees to participate in ownership, use the public markets to raise funds. And, you know, here we are a number of years later, almost on our 50th year of being public.
Yeah, so a lot of things, you know, so you certainly haven't stayed put in the same thing you'd always done. There's a lot of gyrations there. Now you're operating in a number of different marketplaces and a number of different sectors within those markets as well, right? And the real estate industry overall is a large beast. Tell us which marketplaces you are currently operating in and what you're building in those markets.
Sure. I mean, predominantly, you know, people know Melcor as an Edmonton-based company, Western Canadian-based. Residentially and commercially, we've been active in a number of satellite communities: St. Albert, Spruce Grove, Chestermere, Red Deer, Airdrie, Lethbridge. Like, those have been Melcor's bread and butter. As a matter of fact, in Spruce Grove, I think at one time we had most of 80% of the market share of homes built in Spruce Grove were on Melcor land. So that's always been part of the bread and butter. And we followed that strategy commercially as well. But in addition to that, we are in Edmonton, we are in Calgary, you know, we're in Regina. At one time we were in Saskatoon, but haven't been for a while. We're in Kelowna, BC. And then in the early 80s, when things got really tough in Alberta, you know, before my time, but and Melcor was in the same position as many development companies trying to figure out how to survive. Melcor had some opportunities in the United States, in Arizona, and in Redondo Beach, California, Newport Beach area, and did some developments there. So there was part of our culture has been some US development. And then in 2008, when the world changed again and Melcor shares went from $30 to $3, and we looked at our balance sheet and said, what, we're still doing really well. I got my US visa, and we spent a number of long days and trips in the Texas market. And we ended up amassing 1,000 residential apartment units in Houston and Dallas. I also discovered the Denver market. And where that led us is back to Arizona, because you fly through Phoenix all the time. So the long story, even longer occurring, is we ended up getting out of Texas. But right now we have active developments in Denver. We've got a 1,400-acre residential development just south of the airport called Harmony in Denver. We've got a couple of office buildings we bought down in Denver. And then in Arizona, we have an office in Scottsdale, and we're also very active there. We have a number of ongoing residential developments and commercial properties.
How do you find the American markets to be different than the Canadian markets? Is there a mindset difference in the consumer and also the competition? Absolutely.
And, you know, I took for granted the power of a local company in this market. And when I went down to the States, and we were just this Canadian person from this unknown company that, you know, they looked at our balance sheet and said, oh, really? Is that all you're worth? And so, you know, you lose that leverage. But what was interesting, and what doesn't change, Kurian, is any acquisitions, and you have to know the market, and you have to know the dirt, and you have to really dig in. And, you know, Melcor has always been wonderful at, you know, taking our time, and we've been criticized for taking our time for this low company, but it's about understanding where the opportunities go. As publicly traded real estate companies, we're supposed to have defined strategy, and we do, but people have always said you can't really define our strategy. I mean, our strategy is to get a return for our shareholders. And it just so happens that that could take us to Denver, or it could take us to Arizona, or it could take us to Red Deer, or it could take us to Kelowna. And that's really where we go. So the US market is definitely a different animal. It's much more litigious. I spend a lot more time with lawyers, even though we don't do anything wrong. It's just the way it is down there. But it also turns quickly. When things get good in those big markets, they get really good. And when things get bad, well, you know how that goes.
I understand just tuck this in the back of your head. If you stay on the jet, you know, on a litigious basis, you know, that's considered international territory. but as soon as you disembark into Texas, you're in their land at that point. They can serve you the papers. Not that that's going to happen. Not that that's going to happen. That's just general advice for everybody around the table. By the way, I got that off a movie. I don't know if it's true or not, but something to explore. You know, one of the things I've always found fascinating about Melcor is, first of all, I had no clue how big you were. And I knew you were a big local developer, but to play in these international markets, like what is your total assets under management now or development? I don't know how you would describe that in your papers, right?
Well, yes, and this is where trying to decipher our financial statements with two public companies, of which Melcor owns half of the REIT, gets a little confusing. But to break it down, there's about $1 billion worth of land, and a lot of that value is at what we bought it at, not market. And then there's about $1 billion worth of revenue generating properties, office towers, shopping centers, parking lots, golf courses. So that's pretty much how you break it down. Melcor has to consolidate the REIT and report it as though we own 100%, but we don't. We only own 50% of it.
Who owns the other 50% of the REIT? The public?
Public
okay. Got it. One of the things, so, $2 billion company right here down the street on 103rd Street in Jasper. And, I've been in that building so many times and I had no clue that this was that large a company operating there. And one of the things that I've always found fascinating is how accessible the people of Melcor are. I regularly see Tim downtown. Ralph Young has been very actively involved. You're certainly out and about, and that's part of your culture, is it not? And so maybe just go into that a little bit. We had a brief chat about that. But
sure, yeah. And that is not by accident, that's by design. And I give the Melton family the credit for that. They've always been understated, and that's how we've run the company. It's like under promise, over deliver, let the numbers speak for themselves. You don't see me on the front of the Journal bragging about when we hit $1 billion or $2 billion. Like, that's just not our style. And one of the things that's really cool is that we do operate as a small company. Like, it's not cliche to say that, my door, Tim's door, even Ralph was in the office this morning, even though Ralph's retired, he's still a director and he's the lead trustee on the REIT. And, they don't get in the way by any means, but they're always there. And, for me, it's my 19th year at Melcor. And, it gave me an opportunity to learn all kinds of businesses that I wouldn't have learned if I was just sort of stuck in my quadrant. And so a big part of my job as CEO, especially the last 5 years when I took over both companies, was to try and still, we want to be successful and benefit off that and get leverage, but still keep it, relatively accessible and walk on the streets. And I can tell you, we joke about this. When Melcor shares are up, I hear about it walking down the streets. And when Melcor shares are down, I hear about it walking down the streets.
Well, it's a very accessible firm. And like I said, I had no clue because you're so accessible. I always thought you were a smaller firm, but $2 billion is not a smaller firm, right? Whatsoever. Given that the family owns so much of the shares of the business, is it an advantage to continue to be a real publicly traded company? And if so, what are those advantages?
It's a challenge because the reason many companies go public is to access capital markets. And the reason we launched the REIT, the Real Estate Investment Trust, in 2013, we basically took a portfolio of commercial assets and created a second vehicle. And we've raised money and sold units and done that. But in Melcor Developments, the development company itself, we don't raise money in the public markets, we self-fund. And the only time we did raise money, we did a convertible debenture once, and the Meltons ended up taking half. And John Love, my old boss from Kingshead Capital, took the other half. So to answer your question, it's the family likes the discipline of being public because there's no secrets. It's can't hide behind it, so they like that. But the public realm has changed. Sarbanes-Oxley, everything else, the accounting, the reporting. If we had Naomi Stafura, our CFO, on here, she would probably tell you in a much more heated way that being public can be a challenge at any time.
Yeah.
But one of the things the Meltons are looking at, and we have to look at going forward too, is there's still a benefit to keep the development company public. And it's easy to say you shouldn't be, but actually going private is not so easy either. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, right, exactly. I have to ask, and so you brought it up, John Love. Yeah. John Love, who's the son of G. Don Love of Oxford fame, built a large part of the Edmonton skyline in the 70s and such, right? Now, what's it like when you run into him in the lounge in Toronto and you're the CEO of Melcor, he's the CEO of Kingshead right now? What's that interaction like?
I'm still that little guy that started with Oxford that they were trying to teach me how to sort of make things happen. Can I tell you a quick story?
Yeah.
About my first day at Oxford. So in the old days, listen to that, at Oxford, when you were a sort of management trainee, they flew you to Toronto, and the Oxford offices were at the Richmond Adelaide Center. So you stayed at the Hilton, then you got to sort of walk in, you know, so it's like, great, they flew in there and wow, I'm on the club floor. And so the first day you get in the elevator and you go up to the offices. So early as I always am, I'm all nervous, you know, I got crappy suit, but I just try to make it look good. And I get in the elevator and the door's about to close and this big hand comes in. The door opens up, and this very stately gentleman, you know, tall, well-dressed, he comes in and he says, good morning. And you know, I'm like, good morning. And so he presses the Oxford floor. And I'm like, oh, do you work at Oxford? And he goes, you can say that. And when he opened the door, the 3 receptionists stood up. It was Donald Love. It was John's dad. And, you know, it was the funniest thing. And it was such a great experience for me because he was not pretentious. He didn't make fun of me. He was just matter of fact. And then we went to the boardroom. And then, of course, I think for 8 years at Oxford, I got teased about oh, do you work at Oxford? But it was a great experience.
That's a great story. And, you know, yeah, we don't have stories that big, but, you know, we all have that kind of story, right? That's what makes a career. That's for sure. By the way, everybody, you know, if you've got a question in right now for Darin, put it in the chat box. I'm going to turn the mic over to you. You're going to come on screen and ask it, or just say, Karen, you ask it. I don't want to be on screen, but tap it into the chat box in the bottom here, right? But other than that, and we'll open this up to a general Q&A at the end of our interview as well. But if you have something right now, put it in that chat box. Okay, so we had mentioned that 6.4 million people are expected to reside in Alberta from a current 4.2, 4.4 million, whatever it is right today, right? So we're going to increase that by 50% over the next few years. Now, that has to impact real estate. By definition, it has to impact real estate, right? So how does a Melcor now capitalize on that knowledge? First of all, how much veracity do you put in a provincial government projection like that? And then 2, what are your plans to capitalize on that if you believe it?
Yeah, great question, because it bodes to the heart of the strategy. Is we have 11,000 acres of land, but it takes time to develop. You know, you can't just flip the switch. And, you know, Melcor and other developers during the good times got caught. We had a whole, you know, we don't build houses. We create, you know, buy the farmers' fields, put in the parks, put in the golf courses, create the lots and sell them to the home builders. But the home builders can only keep buying if they are selling what they're buying from you. And many developers got caught with big inventory. We pay for it all up front. You know, you get paid at the end. And so that's a bit of a challenge. So a big part of our business is literally trying to guess, for lack of a better word, of will you have inventory available during those hot points? And I'll tell you what, the last 19 months showed everyone that, you know, smaller scale during a bad time makes more sense. But Corinne, to answer your question, the thought of increased net migration is wonderful, because that's what our industry is based on. If people are just moving out, then they're not buying houses, they're not shopping, they're not golfing. So I think the migrations are a really important part of things. One of the things, and I've read many articles and been on many panels, no one can really explain to me what happened during COVID, because it didn't slow down. Like, it didn't. For our company, it was about cash management. It's about smaller, trying to be there, smaller houses. But this insatiable demand continued. And you know, it was even interesting. I mentioned to David when he asked the question earlier on about the poll and about, is it a good time to buy or a good time to sell? It's a very emotional decision where you live, and people get caught up in it. So you get a lot of information. But the reality is that the home builders still have demand. And we can talk about lumber prices and inflation and the rest of it later. And I honestly believe there were a lot of people who spent a lot of time at home, who either didn't like their area, wanted to change, wanted to renovate. And I think that's sort of been the catalyst. There were also a lot of people who didn't travel, didn't spend that money. You know, so there's this crazy wave. I'm the first to admit, I did not anticipate coming out of COVID so strong in the Edmonton market. I expected it in the US because, as I said, it kind of goes up and down quickly. But I think it's an exciting time. But again, it's a time that, you know, the term cautiously optimistic is so overused in development. Like, it's so overused. Even to say it makes me uncomfortable. But now more than ever, you know, if we believe what the provincial government says, which I want to believe, and if I go and we develop 11,000 acres of land and I can't sell it, then the company's done. So there's this middle ground.
Yeah. Well, I fully believe that Melcor is cautiously optimistic, but that's certainly not true for the industry as a whole, is it?
True.
You know, we see a lot of people getting caught with their shorts down, way over optimistic for what they're going to be encountering.